unaware she inherited 10 billion. After her hidden trillionaire mom died, husband abandons his wife pregnant with twins to marry his wealthy boss. What happened at the will reading later left him shaking. He didn't leave her quietly. He didn't even leave her like a husband. He left her like a man trying to prove a point right there at a family and company gathering with guests watching and phones already raised, while his pregnant wife stood near the doorway still holding her medical bag. Derek Combs took the microphone meant for a toast, looked past Lillian like she wasn't even human, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I'm filing for divorce. Effective immediately, she's a liability." The room tilted into silence. Someone gasped. Someone else started recording. No one stopped him. At the edge of the crowd, Lillian Foster, 29, 8 months pregnant, with twins, kept one hand pressed over her stomach like she could shield 2 tiny lives from the humiliation crashing down on her. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes betrayed the shock. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry, nothing that hinted at anything powerful. To them, she was just Derek's soft wife, the woman who didn't understand pressure, the one they whispered was a burden. And standing beside Derek was Marissa Conway, his wealthy boss, the woman he'd soon quietly marry, perfect hair, perfect smile, hand resting on his back like she'd already moved into Lillian's place. Nearby, Derek's mother watched with approval, as if this public destruction was overdue. What none of them understood, what even Lillian didn't understand, was what her mother's death had already set in motion days earlier, a legal machine moving quietly in the background. A will, a trust, a sealed letter meant for Lillian, a number so huge it didn't sound real. In private finance circles, people had once joked that Josephine was the trillion-dollar ghost because the investment structures she quietly controlled moved money measured in trillions. Even though her personal estate, carefully ring-fenced, sat at only $10 billion. But the letter that should have told Lillian everything never reached her hands, because someone inside that house had intercepted it. And, unknown to them, someone outside that house, an investigator Josephine had arranged in advance, was already watching, camera ready, from a dark sedan across the street. So while Derek was busy calling her dead weight and turning her pain into a public show, a different truth was racing toward them, one that would end in a silent room full of lawyers, a will reading, and a sentence that would make Derek's hands start to shake. This isn't just a story about a husband choosing a wealthy boss over his pregnant wife. It's about what happens when a man throws away a woman he never truly understood, right before the world finds out who she really is. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like standing in that crowd while Lillian is erased. When you click that button, you stand with every woman who was mocked, abandoned, and still found a way to rise. Please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The call hit like a punch to the chest. Lillian Foster, 29. 8 months pregnant with twins, froze with her hand on a tiny onesie. The fabric stretched between her fingers like it might tear if she breathed wrong. The voice on the phone was polite, trained, too calm for what it was saying. "Miss Foster, I'm so sorry. This is Dr. Shu from Street Bridget's. Your mother, Josephine Conley. She passed away early this morning." For a second, the room didn't feel real. The walls looked too steady. The air looked too normal. Lillian's stomach tightened, twins shifting, as if they felt her shock before she could name it. She tried to stand, but her knees didn't trust her. She lowered herself to the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the open drawer of baby clothes, as if folding and sorting could keep life from changing. Josephine was gone, not sick, not getting better slowly. Gone. Lillian pressed the phone to her ear, said thank you, because people said thank you on the phone, even when their world had just cracked. The line went quiet, and she sat there staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. She thought of calling her husband right away. Of course she did. That's what wives did, wasn't it? They reached for the person they trusted most. So she went to find Derek Combs. Derek was 33, tall, sharp-featured, always dressed like he was being watched. He worked under a powerful executive, his boss, Marissa Conway, a wealthy woman with a reputation for turning people into stepping stones. Derek wanted her approval the way some men wanted oxygen. When Lillian walked into the living room, Derek was already halfway inside his phone, thumb moving fast, face tight with focus. He didn't notice her tears at first. "My mom," she said. The words came out small. My mom passed away. Derek blinked once, like he'd heard a noise he didn't understand. Then he exhaled, slow and impatient, not openly cruel, not yet. But the impatience was there, like a warning sign. Lillian, now, he said, eyes dropping back to the screen. I have a lot going on. The quarter review is next week. Marissa needs these numbers. A lot going on. That's what he called his life these days. She waited for the hug, the hand on her shoulder, the simple, human thing. He gave her none of it. Are you sure? He asked, not in concern, more like he wanted the news to be incorrect so it wouldn't interrupt his day. Lillian nodded. She could feel the twins shifting again, her body reacting to stress with a dull ache that spread across her lower back. Derek didn't see it, or he saw it and chose not to. Okay, he said quickly. We'll deal with it. Call whoever you need to call. I can't miss this call with Marissa. Deal with it. That phrase had become his favorite tool. Like her grief was a package he didn't want to touch. Lillian swallowed, because she didn't want to beg for softness. She had learned long ago that begging only made proud people colder. So she nodded like she was fine, because she was good at that. Lillian hadn't grown up dreaming of money. She hadn't grown up even knowing what real money looked like. Josephine Conley raised her in modest rentals, with secondhand furniture that was always clean, and books that were always newer than their clothes. Josephine never wore flashy jewelry. Never talked about success like other parents did. She talked about choices, about safety, about privacy. When Lillian was a teenager, she once asked why they moved houses so often and why her mother never used the same bank twice. Josephine had paused while stirring a pot on the stove, eyes distant like she was listening to a memory. People love you for what they think you need, Josephine said, voice soft but firm. And they resent you for what they think you have. Lillian didn't understand then. She only understood that her mother kept locked drawers and private mail and a calm face that never fully opened. Sometimes, late at night, Josephine would sit at the table with stacks of paper, legal-looking forms, crisp envelopes, signatures. When Lillian walked in, Josephine would slide the papers under a cookbook like it was the most normal thing in the world. Just grown-up stuff, she'd say. Once, Lillian caught a glimpse of a name on a document, Foster Global Trust, and asked if it belonged to family. Josephine smiled like she was hiding a secret inside her teeth. A long story, she said. One you don't need to carry yet. That was Josephine's way. She believed freedom was quiet and safety was silence. What Lillian never knew, couldn't have known, was that Josephine's grown-up stuff wasn't small. Behind Josephine's plain life was a web of private trusts, silent partnerships, and holdings hidden behind legal walls so strong most people didn't even know they existed. Josephine didn't run around calling herself a trillionaire. But the funds and portfolios she had influence over through Foster Global Trust and other vehicles controlled money measured in trillions. People in certain boardrooms called her the $1 trillion ghost. Her personal estate, though, had been deliberately capped and structured. $10 billion, locked behind conditions and protections. Josephine didn't want a daughter who expected power. She wanted a daughter who deserved it, so she kept Lillian unaware on purpose. And Lillian, trusting her mother, never pushed. She married Derek because he seemed hungry for life, and she believed hunger meant ambition, not danger. She supported his dreams. She made herself smaller when his ego needed space. She told herself love was patience, love was compromise, love was staying. Now she sat on the edge of her bed with Josephine gone, realizing her mother had been her only true protection, whether she understood it or not. Lillian went back to the nursery corner, no fancy theme, no expensive decor, just clean shelves and neatly stacked diapers. She picked up the tiny onesie again and folded it with steady hands that didn't match the shaking inside her chest. She planned which drawer would hold which twin, because if she stopped moving, she might fall apart. Her body ached in that deep, private way pregnancy creates. Every breath felt like work. She didn't complain. She never did. Derek once joked to his friends that she was low maintenance, and they laughed like it was a compliment. He never understood that Lillian had simply learned how to carry weight without asking for applause. She believed marriage was built quietly. She believed loyalty was a daily choice. She believed love didn't need witnesses. Derek moved through the house like a man already gone, checking his phone, adjusting his watch, glancing at his reflection in the window like he was practicing being important. Lillian watched him and felt a strange distance growing, like the space between two people who used to share one life. She mentioned her mother again later, voice softer. I should go through her things, she said. I don't even know where she kept her papers. Derek gave a short sigh. You and your small-town nostalgia, he muttered, half smiling like her grief was a habit that annoyed him. Just do what you have to do. I have a company event coming up. It's important. Marissa's expecting results. An event. Important. Lillian didn't ask who would be there. She didn't ask why his phone never left his hand. She didn't ask why his patience kept shrinking. Because she wanted peace. Because she thought peace could save love. On a shelf in Lillian's bedroom sat a small, outdated phone, never charged properly, never thrown away. It had been Josephine's. Years ago, Josephine had pressed it into her hand. Keep this charged, just in case, she'd said. If there's ever something important about me that you need to know, they'll call this number. Lillian had meant to plug it in. Life got busy. She upgraded her own phone. The old one became a sentimental object instead of the emergency line Josephine wanted it to be. Once, Lillian tried to give it to Derek to recycle. He laughed. Why keep junk? Lillian kept it anyway. She didn't know why. She only knew it felt wrong to let it go. That night, Lillian finally fell asleep with one hand resting over her stomach, as if she could shield the twins from the world simply by touching them. Derek lay beside her, awake. His phone lit up. A message appeared from Marissa Conway, his wealthy boss, the woman whose approval he chased like a lifeline. It read, "We need to talk about your wife." Derek's face tightened. His thumb hovered over the screen. And somewhere, in the quiet machinery of Josephine's hidden life, the first sealed letter from her estate had already been sent out, headed toward the marital address Lillian still thought was safe. The first thing Lillian noticed was Derek's grip, not on her hand, on his phone. He held it like a secret, thumb hovering, eyes darting down whenever it buzzed. And when Lillian asked, softly, if he was okay, Derek's smile came too quickly, too clean. He said he was fine, but his voice carried that thin edge that meant don't ask again, because something had shifted after that message last night. We need to talk about your wife. Lillian didn't know the name attached to it. She didn't know the tone of power behind it. She only knew Derek had gone quiet in a way that felt planned. That evening, he dressed like a man walking into a new life. This is important, he told her while adjusting his jacket in the mirror. It's a company fundraiser and networking night. Appearances matter. Just don't embarrass me, okay? Don't embarrass him. Lillian's face stayed calm, but inside something pressed against her ribs. She was pregnant with twins, carrying 2 heartbeats and still being spoken to like a risk. But she nodded anyway, because her whole life had trained her to keep peace even when it cost her dignity. She chose a simple dress, clean, soft, comfortable. No glitter, no loudness. She wasn't trying to compete. She wasn't trying to be seen. She only wanted to stand beside her husband and feel like they were still a team. But the moment they walked in, Lillian understood. This room was not built for teams. It was built for winners. People wore confidence like perfume. Laughter was practiced. Smiles were weapons. Cameras were everywhere, small ones, phone ones, hidden ones angled the way they always angled, toward status. And right there, in the center of it, was Marissa Conway. Marissa Conway was 38, Derek's boss, and the kind of wealthy executive who didn't need to brag because the room already bragged for her. She had the calm posture of someone who'd never been told no in a way that mattered. Her role wasn't just boss. She controlled Derek's career path, his promotions, his reputation, his hunger. And Derek, starving for validation, treated her approval like it was proof he was finally becoming someone. Marissa never rushed. She didn't need to. She stood exactly where cameras naturally angled toward her, champagne glass untouched, face composed. Power didn't shout from her, it settled, heavy and quiet, as if it owned the air. When Derek arrived with Lillian, Marissa's eyes flicked to Lillian the way people check labels. First, the dress simple, clean, no designer logo begging to be admired. Then Lillian's body pregnant, heavy with twins, moving slower. Marissa's smile didn't widen. It sharpened. Marissa greeted Derek first. "Derek," she said warmly, professionally, like a woman offering him a future. Her hand touched his arm, just a half second too long. Derek straightened as if her fingers had plugged him into electricity. Then Marissa turned to Lillian. Her eyes traveled over Lillian's face with a pleasant, assessing look, like Lillian was a resume someone had already decided not to read. "So this is her," Marissa said. "Not a question. Not curiosity. A conclusion." Lillian offered her hand because that was what decent people did. Marissa looked at the hand and let a beat of silence pass, just long enough for the message to land. Then Marissa's gaze slipped to the chair beside Derek, Lillian's chair. And Marissa sat there. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was surgical. For a fraction of a second, Derek hesitated. Lillian saw it, the twitch of uncertainty, the flicker of should I, before ambition crushed it. Derek let it happen. He didn't offer Lillian his seat. He didn't say, "That's my wife's place." He simply turned toward Marissa, smiling like he'd been chosen. Lillian stood. A few people noticed. A few people pretended not to. Someone whispered to someone else. Phones angled slightly upward, screens glowing, ready to capture humiliation like entertainment. Lillian felt heat rise into her face, but she kept her posture steady. She could do steady. She had done steady her whole life. Marissa leaned toward Derek and said something low, something that made him laugh. Lillian didn't hear the words, but she heard the meaning. "You don't belong where power sits." Conversations moved like rivers around Lillian. People spoke over her, around her, through her, like she was glass. When she tried to add a small comment, something polite, safe, Derek cut her off with a tight smile. "You wouldn't understand this part," he said, voice carrying just enough to sting. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of humiliation that made people question if they were imagining it. Marissa watched, enjoyed. Her eyes held Lillian the way hunters hold prey. Calm, patient, certain. Later, as executives discussed budgets and streamlining, Marissa casually dropped words like audits and cash flow with the ease of a woman who knew how to make numbers sound like morality. "Sometimes," Marissa said, "liabilities disguise themselves as loyalty." Her eyes landed on Lillian's stomach when she said it. Lillian's hand instinctively pressed to her belly, protective. Two small kicks answered, like the twins were reminding her she wasn't alone. Derek didn't notice. Or he noticed and didn't care. Dinner was announced. People flowed toward tables with assigned seats. Lillian assumed she'd be guided to sit beside her husband, but a young assistant approached with a polite smile that wasn't really polite. "Ma'am," she said softly, "could you stand here for a moment? We're adjusting seating for senior staff and partners. Stand here, not asked positioned." Lillian looked toward Derek. Surely he would speak up now. Surely he would say, "That's my wife." Derek didn't even turn. Marissa did. Marissa's gaze said everything Derek wouldn't. "See? Even he knows where you belong." Lillian stood with the assistants while plates were placed for everyone else. She watched laughter spill across tables, watched Derek lean toward Marissa, watched the space beside him remain empty like a statement. No one defended her. Silence became complicity. Later, Marissa raised her glass. The room quieted. Phones lifted slightly. Attention gathered around her like gravity. "To clarity," Marissa said, "to efficiency, and to the courage to let go of what no longer serves growth." People murmured approval. Smiles. Clinks of glass. Marissa's eyes never left Lillian. Derek clapped first. Lillian didn't. Her fingers curled at her side, steady on the outside, trembling underneath. It wasn't just jealousy she felt. It was recognition. Recognition of something her mother once warned her about, how certain people could look at you and decide you were disposable. As the night ended, Derek walked ahead of Lillian, already absorbed in conversation, already moving like she wasn't attached to him. Marissa drifted close, passing Lillian with the scent of expensive confidence. She brushed by as if it was an accident, then murmured almost kindly, almost like advice, "Motherhood makes women smaller. You'll see." Lillian's breath caught. Not fear, recognition. Because in that moment she understood. Marissa wasn't just flirting with Derek. Marissa was studying Lillian, planning around her. And Derek, her husband, was letting it happen. When they got home, Derek didn't ask if Lillian was okay. He went straight to his phone. Lillian stood in the doorway, watching him type with the urgency of a man protecting something precious. Then she saw the screen light up again. Marissa's name. Another message. Short, cold, A command, not a conversation. Tomorrow, I'll come by the house. We'll handle this properly. Derek's jaw tightened, and for the first time, he looked at Lillian not like a wife, but like a problem he had to solve. And somewhere deep in Lillian's memory, her mother's voice rose like a warning she had ignored for too long. People resent you for what they think you have. Lillian didn't know it yet, but the next day would not be about work. It would be about erasing her. And as she turned off the bedroom light, she noticed Derek had locked his phone with a new password, like he was preparing for a war she didn't even know had begun. The papers were already waiting for her, spread across the kitchen table like a verdict. Lillian stepped in and stopped so hard her breath caught. For one sharp second, her mind refused to name what she was seeing. Printed, statements, highlighted lines, a folder stamped with the company logo, and Marissa Conway standing in her home like she owned the walls. Marissa, 38. Derek's wealthy boss leaned against the counter with calm eyes and perfect posture, as if she had simply walked into the wrong house and decided to stay. She held a slim tablet at her side, expression smooth, mouth relaxed, no guilt, no apology, just control. And next to the papers sat Karen Mullen, Derek's mother, early 60s, sharp-faced, dressed like she was attending a courtroom. Karen wasn't a visitor in this marriage. She was a judge who believed she had the right to sentence people. Derek paced behind them, phone in hand, jaw tight. He didn't look at Lillian the way a husband looks at a wife. He looked at her like she was a problem that had finally become official. Lillian's twins shifted, a slow roll inside her stomach. Her body knew something was wrong before her mind could catch up. "What is this?" she asked, voice thin but steady. No one answered her directly, because the accusations didn't arrive as questions. They arrived as conclusions. Karen tapped a page with one fingernail, lips pressed in a kind of moral satisfaction. "She's been siphoning money," Karen said, like she was reading out loud from a script she had rehearsed. "Small amounts from the joint account, enough to hide, enough to make Derek look irresponsible at work." Lillian stared at the page. Her name was printed there, her address, numbers that looked like they belonged to her life. But the account number didn't. The pattern didn't. The transfer descriptions didn't sound like anything she'd done. Her throat tightened. She tried to speak, to ask Derek to look closely, to use his own eyes for once. But Derek's gaze slid past her and landed on Marissa, like her approval mattered more than truth. "You said HR flagged this," Derek said to Marissa, voice low and urgent. Marissa gave a small nod, almost bored. "I said finance flagged irregular personal transfers that create exposure," she corrected smoothly. "I brought you the internal template so you'd understand the seriousness. If this escalates, HR will have to get involved." She said it like it was official, like she was doing them a favor by handling it informally at their kitchen table. Lillian's skin went cold. Marissa wasn't just here as a woman. She was here wrapped in the language of a system, spreadsheets, logos, internal review, exposure. And in Derek's mind, that meant she had the right to define reality. Lillian took a careful step forward. "This isn't..." Karen cut her off without even looking at her. "Stop. Don't embarrass yourself." "Embarrass yourself." Lillian blinked, stunned by how quickly the room had turned into a place where her voice didn't count. Derek finally turned to her, eyes sharp with something worse than anger, disgust, as if believing she could defend herself was offensive. "I carried you," he said. "You were nothing before me. You don't even understand how accounts work, and now look." The words landed like a slap even though his hand didn't move. Lillian felt her face heat, then go numb. Nothing before him? She wanted to laugh because she had been a whole person before she ever met Derek, but she didn't laugh. She couldn't. Her throat was full. Marissa watched, arms folded now, expression composed. She looked almost satisfied, as if this was the moment she had been arranging since the fundraiser, quietly, carefully, like a chess player moving pieces into place. Lillian reached toward the papers, needing to hold them, to prove to herself she wasn't imagining the wrongness. Derek knocked the stack from the table with a sharp sweep of his hand. Pages fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. "Don't touch," he snapped. "You'll contaminate them. We need them as evidence." Contaminate, like she was dirty, like she was the crime. Lillian's hands froze in the air. She felt every eye on her, Karen's cold stare, Marissa's calm gaze, Derek's anger. Even the kitchen itself felt like it had taken sides. Karen stood and moved closer. voice lowering into something that pretended to be concern. Pregnancy makes women unstable, she said, as if she was warning Derek about a dangerous animal. We warned him. We. Lillian's heart thumped hard. We warned him. As if this had been discussed. As if this moment had been planned between them, somewhere behind her back, while she was folding baby clothes and believing in marriage. Marissa nodded one small, silent agreement. Lillian slowly crouched to pick up the fallen pages. Her back protested, twins pressing low, but she forced herself to move carefully. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of panic. As she gathered the papers, her eyes caught something small. A formatting error, a tiny detail most people wouldn't notice. The spacing of the header, the way the audit summary aligned with the margins. Lillian had seen that exact template before on Derek's laptop when he worked late on the department documents he left open. That template came from Marissa's department, not from a neutral HR system. Lillian didn't say it out loud. Not yet. The air wasn't safe for truth right now. Truth would be shouted down. So she memorized it. The way the font sat, the way the highlight color looked, the way the internal review language was written. If she survived this moment, she would need every detail. Derek's voice rose again. I trusted you, he said, too loud, too performative. He wanted this to be a scene where he looked righteous. And this is what you do? While I'm working? While I'm trying to build a future? Lillian looked up at him from the floor, papers in her hands. A future? He said it like she wasn't carrying it inside her body. Marissa stepped closer, heels quiet on the tile, and spoke in a voice designed to sound reasonable. Derek, she said gently, like she was calming a child. We'll do this properly. Documentation, process, boundaries. You can't have someone creating this kind of instability at home. Boundaries. Lillian's stomach tightened. The twins kicked harder now, restless. She breathed through it, refusing to show pain. Karen's mouth curled. She's a burden, she said, not caring anymore. Always has been. Derek didn't argue. That was the loudest part. Lillian stood slowly, one hand braced on the table. Her eyes moved from Karen to Marissa to Derek. She wanted to ask, when did you decide I was the enemy? But she already knew the answer. They had decided the moment she became vulnerable. That night, after the house finally went quiet, Lillian sat alone with her phone in her hands. Derek had gone into the bedroom without speaking to her, like he had already filed her under resolved. Lillian tried to check the joint account just to breathe, just to reassure herself that she could still buy diapers, still buy medicine, still protect the twins if Derek kept escalating. The screen loaded. Then one line appeared. Account closed by authorized user. Her chest went hollow. Before she could move, her phone buzzed again, an unknown number this time. One message, no name. It's over. Don't make this harder. The wording was Derek's. The lack of name was deliberate. Lillian stared at the words until they blurred. And somewhere behind the silence of the house, she heard Derek's voice in the hallway, low and urgent, as if speaking to someone who mattered more than she did. Tomorrow it sounded like they planned to make this official in front of people. The microphone squealed, sharp and ugly, and the whole room flinched. Lillian Foster froze mid-step, her breath catching like she'd been pushed underwater. Her heart slammed once, hard, as Derek Combs lifted the mic that was supposed to be used for a toast. The crowd went quiet the way crowds do when they sense blood in the water, phones already half raised, eyes bright with the thrill of witnessing someone else's life collapse. They called it a celebration dinner, part family gathering, part work event. Derek's colleagues, Marissa's circle, a few relatives. Enough people to make humiliation feel official. Derek stood tall, shoulders squared, wearing the face of a man who believed he was finally in control. He didn't glance at Lillian first. He looked straight ahead, like she wasn't even part of the conversation. I'm filing for divorce, he said, effective immediately. A pause, gasps, a few nervous laughs that died quickly when no one joined in. Lillian's stomach tightened, twins shifting low, reacting to the shock moving through her body. She felt the room tilt, like the floor had been built on lies and someone had just kicked the support beams out. Derek's voice grew louder, more confident, like he was feeding off the silence. She's a liability, financially, emotionally, professionally. I can't let her drag me down anymore. Liability, not wife, not mother of his children. Liability. And right beside him stood Marissa Conway, his wealthy boss, the woman who had been physically present in every step of this unraveling. Marissa's hand rested on Derek's back, not quite an embrace, more like ownership. Her smile was small, controlled, satisfied. Behind them sat Karen Mullen, lips curled in approval as if she'd been waiting for this announcement the way some people wait for dessert. Lillian's ears rang. Her mind reached for logic. This can't be happening like this. Not here, not in front of everyone. But Derek was doing it here because that was the point. Public humiliation wasn't a mistake for him. It was a display. Lillian took a step forward. She didn't want to fight. She wanted to understand. She wanted to say, "I'm carrying your children." She wanted to say, "You don't have to do this." But before she could even open her mouth, 2 security guards moved into her path. Event security, not personal bodyguards, just men in matching polo shirts hired for safety that evening. Faces blank the way faces get when they're paid to obey. One of them lifted a hand slightly, not touching her, just blocking her like a wall. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you need to step back." Mr. Combs asked that speeches not be interrupted. "Step back." Lillian looked past him at Derek. Her eyes begged without asking. Derek didn't move. That was when she understood the cruelest thing. Orders had already been given. This wasn't a decision made in the moment. This was arranged, coordinated, planned. A burst of laughter erupted from someone near the back, too loud, too uncomfortable. Then whispers, then the hum of recording devices. The crowd had turned into an audience. Karen's voice floated from her seat, sweet and sharp at the same time. "Don't cause a scene, Lillian," she said, as if Derek wasn't the one holding a microphone like a weapon. Marissa leaned toward Derek and murmured something. Lillian couldn't hear the words, but Derek's face tightened with satisfaction. He was being guided like a puppet that thought it was a king. Lillian tried again to move forward. Security shifted with her. Marissa didn't look away. She didn't need to. She knew Lillian had nowhere to go inside that room. Then Derek lowered the microphone and spoke without it, voice still loud enough to carry. "You're done," he said, eyes cold. "You're not embarrassing me anymore." Embarrassing him. Lillian's throat burned. She forced a breath in slowly, trying to keep her twins calm. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't raise them. She refused to look desperate in front of people who were hungry for it. That's when the first suitcase landed outside, a heavy thud. Then another. Someone had opened the front door. Someone had gone upstairs. Someone had grabbed Lillian's things like they were trash and thrown them onto the lawn. The sound of the suitcases hitting the ground was strangely loud, final, like punctuation. Lillian's legs moved before her mind caught up. She turned and walked toward the door, not fast, not panicked, because she couldn't afford to fall. Not like this. Not pregnant, not in front of them. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Her suitcases sat on the grass like evidence she didn't belong inside anymore. And there, near the doorway, stood Marissa, wearing Lillian's robe. Not a similar robe. Not a new one. Lillian recognized the small loose thread at the sleeve she had sewn it herself 2 weeks ago while Derek was on a work call. At some point, while Lillian had been kept at the doorway by security, Marissa had slipped upstairs, changed, and walked back out like the house already belonged to her. Marissa adjusted the robe belt slowly, eyes glittering with calm cruelty. "So this is where we'll live?" she said lightly, looking around as if the house had already changed owners. Lillian stared. For a second, her mind went blank, not because she was weak, but because the boldness of it was unreal. This wasn't just betrayal. This was replacement. Marissa wasn't stealing a man quietly. She was stepping into Lillian's life and trying it on like a dress. Behind her, people stepped outside to watch neighbors, guests, corporate allies with nice shoes and curious faces. Some pretended to be concerned. Some didn't bother pretending. Phones were up now. Fully up. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was being documented. Lillian's medical bag was still inside. The one with her prenatal records, her vitamins, the emergency numbers her doctor insisted she keep. Her hand went to her stomach again, twins rolling, unsettled. "I need my bag," she said, voice trembling now despite her effort. "My medical bag." Derek walked out behind Marissa like he belonged to her shadow. He looked at Lillian as if she was asking for luxury instead of basic care. "What now?" he snapped. "You always overreact." "Overreact." Lillian's eyes widened. I'm pregnant, she said, the words coming out sharper than she meant. With your children. Derek's mouth tightened. He stepped closer, and his hands shot out, grabbing her arm hard enough to make her gasp. You're not my problem anymore, he said through his teeth. Lillian tried to pull back. Pain flashed through her arm, then down her side. She clutched her belly instinctively. The slap came fast, a sharp crack that echoed through the yard. Lillian's head turned with the force of it. For a second, she saw stars, then silence, total silence. No one screamed. No one moved. No one stepped forward. Phones kept recording. One woman near the back flinched and half-stepped forward, but Karen's hand closed around her wrist and pulled her back with a quiet, "It's domestic. Don't interfere." Marissa didn't flinch. She simply watched, eyes steady, as if this was a lesson being taught in public. Karen's voice drifted from the doorway, pleased and calm. She brought this on herself, she said, like she was describing a mess on the floor. Lillian's cheek burned. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of them. She tasted metal blood from where she'd bitten the inside of her mouth. She looked at Derek one last time, waiting for something: regret, hesitation, a flicker of humanity. There was nothing. That was the moment her heart stopped trying to save the marriage. She bent down slowly, barefoot in the grass, lifting one suitcase at a time. Every movement hurt. Her belly felt heavy, low, dangerous, but she kept moving because stopping meant collapsing. A car engine hummed softly across the street. Lillian's gaze lifted. A black sedan idled there, parked just far enough to be unnoticed by most people. Inside, someone sat very still, watching the scene like it mattered. Lillian didn't recognize the face through the glass, but the feeling that hit her was immediate and strange, like she was being observed by someone who knew more about her life than she did. Someone connected, somehow, to Josephine's careful, hidden world. The man in the sedan lifted his phone not to gossip, but to record. Angles steady and professional, as if following instructions. And as Lillian slid into her car, shaking, she didn't see Marissa's satisfied smile fade for the first time. Just for a second, like Marissa had noticed the sedan too, and didn't like it. Somewhere. A sealed estate letter addressed to Lillian